You reread their message, not because you missed a detail, but because your body wants the feeling again. The punctuation starts to seem meaningful. Their online status changes and your whole mood tilts. Nothing happened, and yet inside you, something very real just moved. Most of us know attraction. Limerence is stranger. It is attraction that becomes a private surveillance system built around uncertainty. Limerence is the word Dorothy Tennov gave to an involuntary state of longing, fixation, and hope that keeps returning without permission. Tennov coined the term in 1979 after more than 300 qualitative interviews with people describing what they called being in love. She was not describing ordinary affection. She was listening for a pattern, intrusive thoughts, craving for reciprocation, and fear that ambiguity might mean rejection. In Limerence, attention narrows. Other people still exist, but one person becomes the emotional weather system of the day. The person becomes a question your mind cannot stop answering. Did they notice you? Did that pause mean warmth, boredom, or caution? Quietly, and because the evidence is always incomplete, your mind starts manufacturing evidence. A glance, a delay, a remembered sentence. The strange engine of limerence is not certainty, it is almost answered, almost chosen, almost safe. Uncertainty keeps the attachment alive because each small signal can feel like reward. The absence of signal can feel like withdrawal. In the 2025 LQ11 paper, limerence is described as overwhelming, sometimes debilitating, and often linked to negative outcomes when unharnessed. Before that, researchers noted a basic problem: there were no published measures designed specifically to assess limerence as its own construct. The new Limerence Questionnaire, called the LQ11, gave researchers a short self-report tool for studying this experience more systematically. Across 2 validation studies, the authors recruited 269 people in Study 1 and 401 people in Study 2 who had experienced limerence. The questionnaire produced 2 factors: intense need for attachment and neglect to self and others. That second phrase matters. The first factor captures the pull toward the person. The wanting, the scanning, the sense that attachment would finally settle the body. The second factor captures the cost: sleep, friendships, work, appetite, curiosity. The rest of life starts waiting outside the locked room. That pairing matters because limerence is not defined by intensity alone. Intensity can be beautiful. The narrowing is the clue. A crush can expand your life. You become playful, awake, receptive. You notice music again. You feel more available to the world. Limerence often shrinks it. The world becomes background noise while one person's possible response becomes the main event. You start arranging your day around invisible possibilities. Maybe you'll run into them. Maybe they'll ask. Maybe silence means they are thinking. A delayed reply can ruin lunch. A friendly emoji can rescue the afternoon. The emotional scale becomes wildly sensitive. This is why calling limerence just a crush misses something. A crush lives beside you. Limerence moves into the control room. Researchers are cautious here. Limerence is not a DSM diagnosis, and not every intense attachment deserves a clinical label. The 2024 Scoping Review found only 43 peer-reviewed publications after narrowing searches, which shows how marginal the literature still is. That scarcity matters. Without good measures, people often borrow nearby language: obsession, addiction, anxious attachment, rumination, fantasy, or simply heartbreak. It also explains why many people feel embarrassed naming it. The experience is vivid, but the cultural vocabulary is clumsy. Tennov's original interviews were powerful because people recognized themselves, not in romance as advertised, but in longing as intrusion. Tennov described limerence as marked by intrusive thinking, idealization, and a powerful need for reciprocation from one specific person. One participant might feel euphoric after a tiny kindness, then devastated by a neutral tone. The relationship exists mostly as interpretation. The beloved person becomes partly real, partly imagined. Not because the limerent person is foolish, but because longing fills blanks aggressively. Small pause. That is why limerence can feel so intimate with someone you barely know. The mind supplies proximity the relationship never earned. If the person seems available, hope surges. If they seem unavailable, the obstacle can intensify the story instead of ending it. If they pull back, the absence becomes data. You review everything. What changed? What did you miss? The loop is not only emotional, it is behavioral. Checking, rehearsing, imagining, avoiding, returning. Each ritual promises relief. The brain prefers a ritual that briefly soothes uncertainty, even when the ritual teaches uncertainty to come back louder. That makes limerence resemble neighboring processes, especially rumination and compulsive checking, but resemblance does not mean it is identical to them. In 2021, Albert Wyant published a case study using cognitive behavioral ideas, especially exposure and response prevention, to reduce limerence rituals. By the 9-month follow-up, rituals reportedly fell from more than 8 hours across 2 weeks to about 10 minutes. One case cannot prove a treatment, but it shows how reducing compulsive responses may weaken the loop for some people. Still, it points toward a useful distinction. The longing may not be chosen, but the rituals around longing can sometimes be interrupted. The checking ritual says, "I need certainty now," but the relief fades and soon the mind asks again. Avoiding the ritual may feel unbearable at first. Research suggests one approach is practicing uncertainty without immediately feeding the compulsion. This is not about shaming desire. Desire is human. The question is whether desire has started governing your attention. It is a way of asking, has this person become a relationship, or have they become a regulating device? Another useful question is simple: what am I neglecting when I return to this thought for the 100th time? Not, do they love me? Not, what did that gesture mean? But, what part of my life is going offline? If someone's smallest signal can change your whole day, the issue may not be love's depth. It may be dependence on ambiguity. If you enjoy careful psychology without the easy slogans, consider liking or subscribing. It helps more people find this quieter kind of conversation. Part of the difficulty is that limerence can borrow romance's language. It says, "This is destiny. This is rare. This is proof." Culture romanticizes fixation when it ends happily. The waiting, the pining, the grand gesture, we edit out the private suffering. But limerence asks whether the story is nourishing you or whether you are starving inside a beautiful narrative. It may look like devotion from outside. Inside, it can feel like being held hostage by your own hope. It may also contain tenderness, creativity, and longing that are not pathological. That is why the boundary matters. The scoping review explicitly warned that the goal is not to label people experiencing limerence as deviant. That matters because shame often makes hidden loops stronger. People hide the behavior, then lose the chance to examine it clearly. Ethical language matters, so does accuracy. Attraction is not automatically obsession, and obsession is not automatically dangerous. Calling someone your limerent object sounds cold, but it names the structure, the person your mind has organized itself around. Calling them the object also protects their humanity. They are not the fantasy, the cure, the answer, or the judge. Carefully. If this pattern feels familiar, consider speaking with a qualified professional, especially if distress, sleep loss, or safety concerns are present. Consider reducing ambiguity rituals gently. Fewer searches, fewer rereads, fewer imagined conversations. Not as punishment, but as an experiment in attention. Consider widening the day on purpose. One meal with a friend. One walk. One task completed without consulting the loop. If distress feels unmanageable, professional support may help. Limerence is not a moral failure and you do not have to white-knuckle it. The goal is not to become indifferent. Indifference is not the only alternative to obsession. The goal is to recover proportion, to let one person become one person again, not the weather, map, and verdict. That distinction protects both people, the one longing and the one unknowingly carrying too much symbolic weight. It lets you ask for closeness without making uncertainty into proof of fate. Limerence shows how easily longing can become architecture. A thought becomes a corridor. A corridor becomes a home. A person can become a loop when uncertainty, imagination, and reward learn to travel the same path. And because the loop feels like love, it can be hard to notice when love has become the least examined part. So the next time you reread the message, pause before judging yourself. Curiosity is cleaner than shame. Ask, is this connection expanding my life or turning one person into the place where my whole mind goes to wait?